Welcome back to the third installment to my video. I'm actually pumping these out pretty quickly, and I have all this fresh in my mind. I think I need to do more of this, where I study a little bit beforehand, have it fresh in my mind, rather than study and give myself a break and do it some other time. Because I don't have it hot and ready as of now. So hopefully, my energy and everything that I'm presenting here for this particular video, and also this third installment, has been very helpful. So of course, comment down below anything else that would be contributing to further argument against this whole idea that Hebrew Israelites are the chosen people of God specifically, and everybody else just has to take an L for some unbiblical reason. So for this one, right, I'm definitely going to talk about it as the prophecy that they are relying too much. So I have spoken with a Hebrew Israelite a couple of weeks ago, and someone that's relatively new as well, so not really unfamiliar with where their line of reasoning and arguments stem from. But I do notice that the main ones, right? I just want to focus on Deuteronomy 28 for this one and several others as well. But really, it takes the whole bulk. If you actually read it contextually, there's really three main arguments that you can quickly disassemble. But I just want to focus on the first one. This definitely cannot pertain to the Hebrew Israelites. On paper, if you simplify and summarize it, if you actually see what's Deuteronomy 28 really talking about, it has specific conditions as to what type of slavery this is, and has it been fulfilled, and is it really conveying that it comes from the transatlantic slave trade? And to the quick answer to all of that would be no. And I guess I'll just break it down one at a time. For instance, the ones that are selling are not the ones that are buying the slaves to sell. It's actually the Jews. So if you actually open up Exodus 21, we see that option to sell each other as a form of a service, specifically when it talks about debt reconciliation. So obviously, this type of slavery is not likened to chattel slavery. And so not all forms of slavery is bad. I don't know, from a postmodern view, that sounds ridiculous to say, but slavery in those times was another word for servitude or involuntary servitude, or actually voluntary servitude, rather said. Specifically, if you read in the first, let's say like half of Exodus 21, it gives you that there's different types of servants. The KJV clearly conveys this as bond servants. They serve to amend the bond that they have, the money that they owe to a specific individual that they cannot pay right then and there. Then there's maid servants, same thing, but they serve a different purpose. Instead of working, they can be used as a wife. Here, I owe this debt for you. I'll give you my daughter, cancel this debt, making sure you hold up your end of the bargain. She could be your wife. So definitely don't see it there. And I guess I'll introduce this argument. If it's so bad that your enemies is the ones that are buying you, then you have tough time for Exodus 21 because you're doing it to each other. So are you, by extension, the white man itself that you are characterizing as this boogeyman in your mind that you're really being touching? And I'm honestly, I shouldn't have laughed too much because I see this as a very serious thing, that you are teaching this mindset or under the impression of thereof, that you're constantly being oppressed and there's a specific group of people that are different from you. Therefore, I am justified to be as oppressive as them as they were to me. I don't see an eye for an eye as a valid thing to do to combat this. I find it very futile and not edifying in any sense of the words. And going back onto that prophecy, right? The Jews are offering themselves. In the transatlantic slave trade, that wasn't an option. You were forced out of it, which Exodus 21, verse 16 specifically, if I'm not mistaken, says that if you steal from their land, you will be executed. That's what the law demands. So clearly, those Jews that specifically talking about this prophecy is because of their own rebellion, right? And because of their own rebellion, they return to a place that they were delivered from God. So you can see this as a Christian, that we tend to do that as well in our personal lives. We go back to the place that God delivered us from. But if they're going back because of a prophecy, because they're going back to Egypt in a physical or spiritual sense, which of course I'll touch on a bit, then that seems as God that didn't actually delivered the Jews from Egypt, when in fact in the text, specifically in Exodus, clearly convey that. So if you're going to heed to this argument, you're actually making the Bible, unfortunately, contradict itself. And the more you really look at it, it doesn't actually help out in your perspective, because another instance is that it also clearly states within the text that nobody wants to buy you. So even though the Jews are the one that are placing themselves that, hey, I want to offer my services would you buy me? Would you, let's do this contract so I can earn some type of money? The ones that they're offering themselves to don't want it at all. They actually refuse to do so, which would make sense because this prophecy isn't kind of a one time thing. It's most likely a reoccurring. I would actually argue that it has already happened twice and it's going to happen a third time in the Great Tribulation. Those 7 years also refer to Jacob's trouble. I'm not going to talk about that too much because eschatology, love studying it. That's where I'm at right now. And it's so dense that I think I would just pivot into a whole new conversation. But I will talk about the two instances. If you look in Jeremiah, and I believe it's in chapter 42 to 44, you can read that this happened with the Babylonian exile. They actually had to leave and they lost their identity for the most part. They went from a group of people that mainly primarily spoke in Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, and it transitioned into kind of the Hebrew that we see today and even our Armenian or Aramaic that we see Jesus can speak with alongside with Greek. That's how it developed. They lost their sense of identity, and because of a result of that exile, when they were sieged by Babylonians, they lost their national identity to such a degree. So you see some errors there as well, because of course, if they had to leave everything behind during the Babylonian exile, they have to make up monies because they had to leave everything behind, including their gold, their finances, and stuff like that. And you can also read the siege of Jerusalem that happened 70 AD. Again, same thing happened. And it specifically says that they will go into the land of Egypt. You can't really spiritualize this kind of thing because going against what God promised that he will deliver, and they're doing it on their accord. Did God work alongside with them, with the Israelites at this time, and send them as a kind of an agreement, as a form of punishment? No, that poses a lot of issues. And I've actually looked into this, and some of these argue this line of thinking, but when I actually read the Hebrew, it doesn't really convey that. In there, it literally talks about Egypt being sent in a masculine plural. If it was actually in the sense of a spiritual thing, like we're going back to a spiritual Egypt rather than a physical Egypt, because of course the transatlantic slave trade was the focus point of Africa all the way to America, and south of that, that just obviously you can't really fit into that prophecy amongst yourselves. So you have to get a physical sense out of that because it fits into your eisegesis. You can't read that into the text because it literally is a physical. I'm sorry, masculine plural form rather than feminine. If it was feminine, then you can say it is a spiritual aspect. But the Bible clearly conveys both of them. They don't refer to the same thing. And it's definitely not referring to a spiritual essence of Egypt because the transatlantic slave trade, Egypt wasn't involved in that particular trade at all. So that's a very difficult thing to do. If you're going to disregard all of that, you're basically throwing the Bible. If you can't actually look in the text and you just believe somebody and don't even actually look it in and see, is this the case? Then you're just as deceived as the rest of the world. It doesn't matter if you are ethnically a Hebrew Israelite because your ancestors, your dad's dad was a slave at some degree involved in the slave trade. The prophecy doesn't line up. And I want to say it's a prophecy. It's like, it's a curse, right? If you are blessed, you'll receive, well, this would happen. If you actively go against, you'll be cursed in this specific manner. And it has happened several times, at least twice. This cannot pertain to the Hebrew Israelites because let's put that to the side. How many nations before and afterwards were a part of some type of slave trade? Never mind that this prophecy definitely is not describing the transatlantic slave trade because that involves chattel slavery. You don't have a choice. However, Deuteronomy 28 talks about Jews making that choice among themselves, and they're willing to go to a specific physical location in Egypt. That really reduces to an ambiguous general sense. And when you go to more specific with the transatlantic, it does not describe the same thing. But just granting some aspect of this, if we look at other slave trades, every single nation at one point was a slave. Even the word came from Slavics. Slavics were primarily slaves, and there was white people being oppressed by other white people. So I don't see this coinciding any sense of degree. You will have to buy into this lie to find some kind of repercussion or some kind of amendment what was done prior to compensate to do today when you haven't faced any type of oppression. If anything, all the oppression that you're feeling today is because you're actually disregarding the word of God and what to do when these times are happening instead of relying on God to give you that provision really and get you out on whatever type of oppression that you can feel, whether it be physically immediate or some kind of broad sense, trying to feel vindicated or justified, rather said, by acting a certain type of way and making other people outside of the 12 tribes of Israel uh, making them feel bad and evil, when in fact that you're the ones that are spreading this hate if you're under this impression. Not only are you believing in it, but you're propagating it, because obviously your end goal is to have a lot of people buy into it if they are quote unquote part of a descendant of the transatlantic slave trade. It just seems very ridiculous. The gospel is supposed to be preached for all of them. It literally says that the Matthew 24 and other renditions in the other gospel says that the end will come after the gospel has been preached to the whole world. You are definitely not doing that because, one, it's not the same gospel, right? You are preaching really just racism. Let's not be sugarcoating it. And the second thing is, you're definitely not doing that. You're too concerned. I'm like, you are a fellow brethren whose parents were slaves, therefore you're a Hebrew Israelite. It's just so ridiculous. And I can see why people a lot of push off. Like, honestly, the ones that I speak so far, Hebrew Israelites, polite, but unfortunately, you have been misguided and deceived. And honestly, if you're watching this and you're a Hebrew Israelite, I'm open to have a discussion, right? Let's put the animosity to the side. We have clear differences as long as we're respectful, hear each other out. So that is speaking past each other, just having these arguments ready and really just speaking through an actual, argument. I honestly, if I was on your end, it'll be very difficult to prove something that's clear and that's scriptural in the case. Unfortunately, I don't know how else to put it. I guess the last thought I have to say, because really I just summarized it too. If anything, I found it very disheartening and sad that instead of releasing yourself from this oppression that your ancestors have gone through, you're keeping yourselves in by propagating this thing and really just sharing with other people that don't see this view, because it actually is not basis on any type of relevancy or truth. And hopefully that they are equally as very like aggressive. I want to say animalistic, right? Aggressive towards other people because you feel justified in propagating this non-fact, right? I don't find that as useful. I'm not surprised that other people, even those that quote unquote on the surface level, because that's what you're interested in, that are brothers, right? You guys have similar skin tones or whatnot, not being on the same page as you, because we don't actually keep ourselves condemned in this oppressive mindset that that is voluntarily. So notice how it's pretty ironic how in this particular prophecy it's the Jews that decide to put themselves in this situation to be slaves, and you're doing the exact same thing in a spiritual sense. So you don't even have to go to Egypt, right? Let me just grant that. If you're going with the line of argument, you yourself are actually fulfilling that prophecy, and it's judgment on you. You are the one who are actually oppressing yourself. It's not this oogie boogie monster underneath the bed, this dude and that and the other. Jews have been, or rather said, Hebrew Israelites have done evil to other nations, and even amongst themselves. They even did this thing with slavery where they do with servitude. So I don't know how you're going to even argue without that. They don't all mean the same thing. What you're specifically criticizing, right? Shadow slavery, it's bad for everybody, regardless of who it is that they're suffering and where it's coming from. It should be condemned outright, but it doesn't pertain to you. You are not a byproduct of shadow slavery. If anything, you're a byproduct of living in a country that this opportunity can give you at any time, anywhere. If we're talking about the United States, because that's where I'm at, there's nothing really holding you back. If anything, you are holding yourself back. So I think I'll just end it right there. If you have any disagreements, voice your concerns down in the comments below. I really do want to see this engagement. Again, the door is open with the opportunity to engage. I suggest we do so. And if I talk to one of you in public or through VC, all the information, there it is, reach out. Don't be afraid to. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Really, I can actually go off for more. I'm going to take a break right now and do other points, but I think this is pretty much a nail biter, right? It'll be difficult to get around this. Oh, actually, something just came into my mind right now. Another portion of it is that, of course, this particular ideology is contingent on filling the prerequisites of who they are to justify that this is relevant to them pertaining to the prophecy. Actually, if you look at Deuteronomy 18, specifically in the last couple of passages, it even tells you that who is from God. Like, that they are speaking from God, like they're a prophet. If they say something and actually come into fruition, if it doesn't, that means it didn't come from God. So everything that you're actually under the impression of didn't actually happen, because it's not even talking about what's even mentioned in Deuteronomy 28. So if an Hebrew Israelite is making a claim, right, and this is my challenge to you directly, if you are from God, you should be able to make a prediction, not based on your ethnic and your calling and whatever, right? that you are from God because you're by extension one of the 12 tribes of Israel, because the transatlantic slave trade is just so ridiculous to mention that every time. But if it's true, then you should be able to predict that actually come to fruition. If you can't, then you're actually not from God and you're speaking from your own accord, according to the text. So I think I'll just end it up right there. Nothing else needs to be said. That's it for me. Thank you for watching. Comment down below, share all that good jazz. And as always, take care and stay